Hello, you're listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. Welcome to today's podcast. I want to say a big hello and a big thank you to the people who are downloading all over the world. And if you're listening without downloading, then a big warm welcome to you too. So the biggest downloaders this week have been the UK, Japan, USA, New Zealand, Canada, Ireland, Australia, Singapore, Norway, and Belgium. So a big warm welcome if you're in any of those countries. And to be honest, wherever you are, you're very welcome. I'm glad you're here with me. I hope you're having a nice day. I hope it's turning out to be the day that you'd like it to be. Now, I want to talk today about a topic that was sent in by a listener. So it's a requested topic. So thank you so much. And if you have a topic that you would like me to chat about, then just email me. My email is always in the description box, or message me via social media. So this one is quite a serious topic. It's about belonging versus just fitting in. So I think, livery yards, barns, farms, whatever you happen to call where you have your horse in your country, then they're curious places, aren't they? And if you're on a shared yard, then sometimes the people who are there are not necessarily your kind of people. And if this goes on for a long time and you spend a lot of time at the yard, or maybe you're a competitor and you compete on your own, then again, it can feel a little bit lonely, even if you're on a very busy yard. What if you don't fit in? Now, some people would say, well, move yards, find somewhere else, but that's not always possible. Especially nowadays, particularly in the UK, I'm not sure where it is where you are, you can let me know. Lots of yards are closing because people find it difficult to run as a business. They can't make enough money from it. So if yards are closing and you're in a yard and it's the closest to your home, or it's the best one for you, then it's very difficult to think about leaving that yard. But the message here isn't about making friends. It's a little bit about accepting that sometimes we're just not going to click with the people around us, and that's okay. So first of all, I want to think about this myth, if you like, that every yard is one big happy family. And I think social media has created this idea that every livery yard is full of supportive people and they all have drinks of tea together, they all ride together, because many aren't. Some yards are quite cliquey. Some yards are competitive, and I don't mean that they go out and compete, but the riders are competing with one another. They're trying to show each other who's the best rider, who's the best horse owner, who's the best carer, and there are yards where some people just want to do their horse and go home. And sometimes I have to admit, I'm a little bit like that. If I'm tired, then a brief chat with people and then I go home, because I want to spend the time mainly with my horses, because I've usually spent most of the day chatting to people, which is fun because I love my job and I would never change my job. But sometimes I need that silence. Sometimes I'm not in a very chatty frame of mind. So realizing that wherever you are, your experience isn't unusual can be very reassuring in itself. It doesn't make you feel like you belong necessarily, but it's reassuring that people around the world feel the same way. And that leads me on to saying that belonging isn't the same as fitting in. Because if you if you feel differently, if you think differently to the people on your yard, you often think, consciously or unconsciously, that you're the problem. There must be something that you need to do. You need to change how you talk to people, change your interests. You know, there's something in you that you have to do. You have to be proactive. But it can also be that this is not quite the right social environment for you. So you're not the wrong person and they aren't the wrong people, but there isn't any gel between you. So you don't have to change your personality. You don't have to sort of struggle to fit in and change yourself to fit in. But if we can learn acceptance of this fact and find horsey people who are more like us, maybe elsewhere. So for instance, you might have a riding club. You might have some kind of group of people that are your people, but they're not on your yard. Maybe they're too far away, the location is different, or maybe they have their horses at home, but they are your kind of people. So how are you going to find these type of people? Well, yes, you could join a riding club, but what if there's no riding club near you? Then maybe it's time to start something. Maybe it could be that you meet in a certain cafe, you know, on a certain day, and you put in the local groups on social media that it's a coffee and a cake and it's a chat. And, you know, also I've seen very recently on social media a buddy system. So this has been where people don't have anyone to go out with on their horse, so they can't trail ride or hack with anybody. And they are trying to buddy up with somebody that they could meet, possibly drive to, or that person could drive to them, and then they can go out together. So that's another way of thinking about it, that if there is somebody in your location that can buddy up with you and go out with you for rides, or maybe to meet someone at a competition, or hire a school together. If there's something like that, that could be another avenue, which means that you have the horsey people, but not necessarily the people that are on your yard. So another way to look at it, or another thinking point, if we think there is a perfect yard out there, then we may not make the best of the one that we're on. So yards can be very variable, as we all know. The facilities can be very variable. The people there can be variable. So I'm not talking about a yard where, you know, it's not safe and there's barbed wire everywhere, or, you know, objects get left in fields. For whatever reason, it's unsafe to ride or it's unsafe for horses. And I'm not talking about yards that are very toxic, where people are gossiping, where there's a difficult atmosphere around the yard, and that might be one person, or a group of people. I'm talking about a yard where, you know, it's the best yard for you in terms of maybe it's the facilities or how the horses are kept, but it's the people that, you know, as I said before, rather than forcing yourself to fit in, that there is still this feeling of not belonging. Now, if we have this yearning for the perfect yard, I don't know about in your area, but in my area, there isn't a perfect yard. Even people who have their horses at home don't have a perfect yard. So if there is no perfect yard around, then we need to stop waiting for one to appear out of the ether, just kind of comes along, pops up one day. Oh, here you go. Here's the perfect yard with the perfect people. But instead, by staying on that same yard, we need to think, how do I protect my energy while I'm here? How do I start to feel that this is my horsey home? Because that's more empowering than waiting and waiting for somebody else. So maybe that means it depends on the yard, it depends on the people, the personalities and so on. But it might mean saying hello without expecting a friendship. It may mean keeping healthy boundaries. It may mean enjoying your own routine and having a little bit of peace and quiet. Or, as I mentioned before, it might be finding that fulfillment, filling that need, if you like, outside of the yard. So it's very important to think about your horse not being your only connection. Even if there isn't a riding club nearby, there are still those communities that don't rely on a location. So, for example, there are Facebook groups that are very specific. And if there isn't one that's very specific for you, then create one and tell me about it. And I'll tell people on the podcast about it. So you can have people from all around the world join in. There could be a WhatsApp group. I know sometimes those notifications get a little bit annoying, but it could be that you post a problem, post a thought, and you get lots of replies. There are things like online training memberships. If you wanted to do a course with a group of people, they may be your people as well. There are podcast communities. Okay. So maybe you do some kind of community within the podcast. And as I say, just let me know, because maybe it could be a Facebook group. And because everybody listens to this podcast, you've got two things in common. You've got horses, you've got equestrian mindset. So that could be a lovely opportunity as well. There are things like online book clubs for horse people. So you get together after you've all read a particular horsey book and you discuss the book, the pros, the cons, what you liked, what you loved, what you didn't like. So sometimes it's not about having a real connection, because that's not possible, but there are more virtual connections. And that sometimes, these online things become real life later on, which I love. Now, a slightly unexpected point here, if you like, for my next thought, that kind of bond, if you want to call it that, doesn't need to come from horse people. So sometimes we put a lot of pressure on the yard to provide our social needs. And I've been on yards that have been absolutely fantastic, where you have days out together. I remember going to horse racing together. I remember going to restaurants together. I remember going out, and I'm trying to think now, we've been to different competitions to watch people compete together, and it really was a very, very social yard. We'd have barbecues and so on. But there are also yards that don't do any of that. So if we stop the yard being our social connection, then we can also get emotional support from people who are dog walkers, our neighbours, our work colleagues, our family. I know it's sometimes it's not easy to talk to people in detail about your horse. People who aren't horsey are going to get bored pretty quickly when you start talking about the variety of horse feeds or which saddle pad would look best. They're not going to perhaps have the full appreciation, but your horse life doesn't have to provide everything for you. And so I want to ask you a question now. If nobody at your yard ever became a friend, could your horse life still be fulfilling? And I think I personally would probably say yes, because I adore my horses. It wouldn't be perhaps as good, but I still think that my priority, and again, this is just my personal opinion, goes with my horses. And it's a powerful question. So I'm going to ask you again. If nobody at your yard ever became your friend, I'm not saying they're your enemy, but they're people who pass you by, could your horse life still be fulfilling? Because if you do answer yes, then you would have shifted your happiness away from something that you can't control. So, a positive, hopeful ending. I just want to say, that horses and being horsey, it has a funny way of helping to introduce us to people when we're least expecting it. So it might be somebody that you meet at a clinic. It might be somebody who comments on your Instagram post. It might be someone who listens to this podcast. It might be someone you bump into at a competition. And having that one person who gets you is absolute gold. So if today's episode did resonate with you in any way, come and find us. Perhaps we can get together in a community in WhatsApp or Facebook. And if you're feeling like the odd one out on your yard, I can almost guarantee that you probably aren't. You probably aren't the only one. And the people who you think are cliquey and they stick together and they're all the same and they're all friends, there might just be one or two of them that are desperately trying to fit in and not really feeling it. Okay, so let me know how it goes. Let me know your thoughts. I'd be really, really curious to know them. Email and social media contacts are down in the description box. Take care, and I will see you again next time.